Hello everyone, I'm Brian, and welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue.
How much so? From childhood to youth to middle age, our mind, just imagine what your mind was 10 years ago. Just imagine what your mind was like when you were a teenager in high school. We would be very embarrassed to think that, oh, that was me, that's what I thought. It was. But don't be embarrassed, because again, it was not. It was just the mind. Just as you're not your clothes, you're not even your mind. So you can save yourself the embarrassment. You're fine. The mind was like that. And imagine what the mind was like when you were a kid, 10 years old, 5 years, and you can't remember. We can't remember. What was the mind like when we were 6 months old? It would be such an alien mind to us. The mind is continuously changing. The body is continuously changing. People are changing. Time and space, ever-changing scenes are coming and flowing before us in this anitya drishya. And this anitya means impermanent, transient, temporary. The Buddha says, what is but life but a bubble on a fast-flowing stream? What happens to a bubble on a fast-flowing stream? Bursts. It's very delicate. I have a good friend here in Central Park who blows bubbles. That's what he does all day long. Beautiful, iridescent, colorful bubbles, huge ones, soap bubbles. And they float around for a few seconds. If you touch it, it bursts and it disappears back into space. That's what our life is. And he does this beautiful trick. Little kids love those bubbles. And he has this beautiful trick where he makes a little kid stand and he blows a bubble around the kid. So that's very beautiful. But that's what we are. I was thinking, here's our bubble. And the body is part of that bubble. And our thoughts are part of that bubble. And it bursts. Anitya drishya. And then is the word drishya. Notice one thing, however.
Real quick before he explains that. That's actually, interesting way of looking at it. I think that a Westerner could understand. I was trying to think of that from my Westerner mind. Really weird. But, I think something that Sadhguru says as well, where, as an example, as air is Brahman, and then the bubbles that are floating around is Atma, our individual selves. But that little bit of bubble that captured that little bit of air is always been part of Brahman. It's the same thing. It's just that the little tiny bubble, it's just a little bit of us on top of everything else. I didn't say that quite right, but you get my point. So the fact that these little bubbles are just little tiny pieces of life, as Sadhguru would say, that we captured for ourselves, but ultimately we're essentially all Brahman. We're all, I forget what, I know Sadhguru doesn't say Brahman, he says, I think he uses life a lot. We're all little pieces of life. The biggest, all little pieces of life. We're all part of life. But anyways, that is a pretty good example. However, I know from my Western mind would say, well, what's that little bubble that captured a little air that separates the bigger air outside of it? You know. And then again, it's just me. I think about a lot of things. This is how I solve problems. I think about all possibilities. But I get what the whole point is the fact that we're capturing a little bit of life, a little bit of Brahman, and thinking that's who we are, and we're separate from everything else. And in reality, we're not. The bubble itself is imaginary. This little bit of life that we captured is not us. It's part of us, because that little tiny bubble is who we think we are. In reality, it's not. We're the air all around the bubble and including the little air inside the bubble. We have this delusion thinking that we're the little bubble.
One thing, all of it appears to you. You are the one who experiences this. You say, yeah, that's true. So, that seems to be part of the problem. That we are experiencing this massive change and aging and disease and death and old age and decrepit. But you are experiencing it. That which is experiencing is not part of the bubble. The body is part of the bubble. Mind is part of the bubble. But the mind is appearing to you. The body is appearing to you. And the bubble of this life is appearing to you. That, the pure subject, is consciousness, is awareness, is that mass of light. We do not know it. We do not see it. It's there. Vivekananda called it the open secret of what we are. This unchanging mass of illumination, light shining, light, not this physical light. Nature of this light is consciousness. That's light shining, this is what we are. Now, anitya drishyeshu vivichya nityam. Swami Ramakrishnanji writes about Vivekananda. In this mass of change, continuous mass of change which everybody experienced, he also experienced. But the difference is, in this, he was able to, vivichya literally means, the Sanskrit word means vivich prithak karane, separating. He was able to separate, to see in every experience, in meditation, out of meditation, in action and in inaction, in the midst of action, in midst of inaction, in repose, in sleep, in waking, everywhere he was able to see means within quotes, the background radiance, the consciousness to which this entire universe is appearing. Vivichya nityam. What's the use of that? All problems, all change and conflict and unhappiness are part of this bubble. So are all pleasures, part of this bubble. But none of them is there in our real nature, in that consciousness. This is what Vivekananda was saying. I come, that peace, without a ripple, that absolute calm. Nirvana is before me, he's saying. I come. That's what we have. We are our real nature. He was able to see that. But he was able to see that in every experience, with eyes open and eyes closed. Anitya drishyeshu vivichya nityam. And then, you see, if we try a little bit, we can also see. The problem is, even if we get to see it, we complain, we can't stay there. And we get mixed up with the bubble of life. Vivekananda says that many come to an understanding, few realize. We are unable to settle ourselves there. But then what does Vivekananda do? The second line. Tasmin samadhatta ihasma leelaya. Realizing the eternal, the background, this radiance, existence, consciousness, bliss, he was able to remain absorbed in samadhi in that, and leelaya, just like that. We are unable to steady ourselves in that radiance. It's there right now. Right now it's there. It's just one mass of radiance everywhere. And that is what you are, Tattvamasi. But we can't. The moment, especially when the bubble is very shiny, it's very nice, we get sucked into that. Or it's very terrifying, we get sucked into that. And whether it's temptation or terror, whether it's anxiety or pleasure, we are unable to remain centered in our real nature as the experiencing consciousness, as that absolute. But he could. When? At all times. With that complete ease. He always had it from his childhood, even before he met Sri Ramakrishna. Why he had it, we know. He did not know. We know why he had it. That's his real nature. He is one of those Saptarishis that are always immersed in the contemplation of the divine. But this is what he wanted to give us. The reason why he could easily remain established in his real nature effortlessly.
So you're telling me that he was always in that nature, but he didn't know, he didn't realize he was enlightened since the very beginning? Is that what I'm hearing? That's very interesting, I will say that. To say that someone can be enlightened and not know it. Is that, unless I misheard that, let me know.
Viveka vairagya vishuddha chittam. Because his mind was purified. Purified mind, he could deploy, manifest these two things, Viveka and Vairagya. Viveka, this ability to see the eternal in the non-eternal, ability to see the divine in the secular, ability to see the reality in the midst of appearance. So this is Viveka. Vedanta shows us many ways. But if our minds are not pure, what happens is, if we read all that, it sounds like very nice philosophy, very cool things to know. But is it working for you? Not quite. We say, it's a very interesting language that people use, that I understand it, but I haven't realized it yet. We say that. It's like saying, hey, you are Sarva Priyananda. If I say I understand it, but I still am unable to realize I'm Sarva Priyananda, how silly that is. It means you don't really understand. Viveka, that's Viveka. And that goes with another very important quality of the mind, power of the mind. Vairagya, dispassion. Dispassion. This continuous, we get attached. Terror, temptation, both of them tie us down to this world. Vivekananda writes in one of his poems, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Let go thy hold, sannyasi bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. But we can't let go of our hold. We are trapped somehow. We are suffering because of it, but we can't let go of our hold. Hold on. People, the world, Facebook status, and popularity.
I'm guessing, I figure it's not necessarily those things, but people are afraid. Because they don't know what happens if they let go. It's, generally speaking, people fear the unknown. So by letting go, what's going to happen? I think maybe that? Because I don't think there's a doubt out there that most people fear the unknown. Of course we fear death, for the most part. But I think also the unknown as well. While you're alive, it's the unknown. While you're dying, it's death. So you fear the unknown more so than death, because generally speaking, you don't fear death every day, generally speaking. But it's just the letting go. Whenever he said that, it's just me thinking like someone hanging on the cliffs, like, let go, there's something cool down there. It's like, I don't know, no, I can't see it, you know. And it's kind of like that, where, you know, you don't know what is down there, so you fear it, so you hold on.
Parking spot. And the body as I would like it to be. I don't like that it's changing and aging, and no, I want it this way, I don't want it that way. And the mind, I want it to be happy, a smiley emoji all the time. I don't like it when it is unhappy. Here's a very interesting observation. I was just thinking. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sthita Prajna, the enlightened person, Arjuna asks, what is it like to be enlightened? And Krishna answers in the end of the second chapter, very beautiful, Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha. What is the description, the characteristics of the enlightened one? And the word used is very significant. Sthita Prajna, stabilized enlightenment. We have this complaint, I get it, but I am swept away. So suppose you got it, it became real, and you were never swept away. What would it be like? And then Krishna gives some characteristics there. All of them match Vivekananda, and yet in some cases they don't. Very interesting. He says, first of all, Prajahati yada kaman, one must be able to be completely absorbed, shut down the world, shut down thought, feelings of the body, mind, be absorbed in the reality Aham Brahmasmi, in Samadhi. And Vivekananda could do that very easily. We see this. Second, he says, at the level of our minds, Krishna says, in Samadhi, I am Brahman, centered in the reality, centered in the light within. Good, that's one, most important. Second, what about the mind? When you are interacting with the world, what is the mind of an enlightened one? What is it like? Dukkeshu anudvigna mana, sukheshu vigata spriya. He says, when things don't go your way, even if you're enlightened, there will be things which will not go your way. Old age and decrepit, that will come. Then what happens? Anudvigna, not upset. When the setup is not to your liking, don't get upset. The enlightened one does not get upset. Sukheshu vigata spriya. When things are going my way, I don't have this thirst, this hunger for more, give me more of this, and let me hold on to what is there. No. So this detached. But here, I was just thinking that Vivekananda was not like this. You would say that the serene evenness of mind, but Vivekananda could get pretty upset. He would be quite emotional, he would be quite joyous, and he would weep in sorrow. I was thinking, this is a deeper understanding of what Krishna is saying. It's not that the enlightened one will be sitting quietly and serene, whatever will happen, doesn't matter. Shrug.
And this was my question too, actually. The sheer fact that whenever I first started this video, like, you don't attach yourself to emotions, and it made me think like people like this are kind of cold. At least it seems like that from the first telling of it. It's like, if you don't feel emotions, then you're kind of cold. I mean, I get it. But then also, I remember when I first heard about Swami Vivekananda and how he was emotional, crying and weeping and all that. It's like, how is he enlightened if he's feeling all these emotions? It's affecting him. So, and this is where I get this little confusion where it's like, well, enlightened, you're not affected by your emotions, so you're kind of cold. But then yet, Swami Vivekananda is considered to be an enlightened being, and yet he's emotional. I'm like, I don't. So for me, I understand the fact that they're trying to say that you can still feel all these things, but you know for yourself that you're unaffected by it, your true self. And that's kind of, how to say, that's kind of, I guess for perhaps a Western mind, that might be something difficult to understand, because mind you, I had very much a Western mind at that point. It's like, you're a cold being, but yet you're an enlightened person's emotional. That doesn't make logical sense. But the way I see it is, instead of like a detachment, it's more of an understanding. Understand why you feel a certain way. That way it doesn't, I won't say control you, but that it's not overwhelming, I suppose. And you understand why you're doing it. There's a reason for it. And don't get me wrong, like, people get emotional for a reason, but it's an understanding of that reasoning, I suppose. And to be able to feel emotion is human, but to understand why you're feeling it, and that way it's not in control of you, but you're in control of it, I think, from my perspective, that is perhaps more of an enlightened being type of feeling of the emotion, because obviously, well, not obviously, but I think humans, or people who don't follow Eastern philosophy, I think when they feel their emotions, they let it control them. They let their emotions control their bodies and their actions. Whereas perhaps an enlightened being can feel those emotions but not let it control them. And for me, I understand those emotions, so therefore I don't let it control me. I understand my emotions, I understand my actions. Anyways.
I am Brahman, let whatever will happen, happen. I will not let my mind get upset. If nice things come, I will not let my mind be happy. But a deeper understanding is, let the mind weep with the sorrows of the world. Let the mind be happy with the happiness of the people. You are Brahman, you are pure consciousness. What is it to you? That's a fuller life. He wept. But notice one thing. His weeping and his joy were all for others. He was completely unself-conscious. The difference is, the unenlightened person, we weep for ourselves. I, me and mine. We are joyful for ourselves. And nastily, just the reverse for others. When people are weeping, a little delight inside. People are happy, little jealousy inside. Vivekananda was just the opposite. He had completely self-effaced. Once, Vivekananda was getting ready for a talk here in the United States. He was looking at the mirror, looking at the mirror, and one of the American ladies there, she thought, oh, this young monk, he is vain of his looks. Vivekananda understood, and he looked around and he said, Madam, the strangest thing, the moment I go away from the mirror, I completely forget what I look like. So he's coming to take a look. He is not aware of his own existence. That's why when he would speak, Josephine MacLeod, she met Vivekananda here in New York. And she says that it's like a door had opened and, no, this was another person. Another American lady. She became a very famous poet later on. She says, when Vivekananda started speaking, it's like a door had opened, the form disappeared. It was like a great voice, like a bell. It kept ringing and took us to an impersonal level, that as if a vast mass of luminosity was before us. So because he had no self-consciousness, he could be happy with your happiness. He could weep at your sorrow. He would sympathize completely and yet be completely detached. That was Vivekananda.
I'd say that's something that's very hard to grasp, I'm pretty sure. Especially whenever... still a little bit in terms of me now, but more so me in the very beginning. It's kind of... It's hard to understand how can you... this understanding of detachment. My understanding of it is understanding of the emotion. But the detachment from the emotion is kind of like, how is it done? I guess that's the thing that I don't quite understand. Could it be a cold detachment, as in your true self, even though it's unaffected by it? Well, kinda, maybe is it? Even though it's unaffected by it, because obviously in Vedanta, your true self is unaffected by the material world. Anything in the material world. You know, your emotions, sickness, etc. So there's this... The reason why I say a cold detachment is because there is no emotion in your true self. It's unaffected by emotion. But then your mind and everything else has the emotion, the sickness and everything else. So there's this hard line that your true self is never ever affected by it. But your body, your mind is all affected by it. And that's the reason why I say it's cold, because when someone feels no emotion, it's very cold. At least that's the saying in the United States. And probably most of the world, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of this cold attachment. And that's the reason why it's kind of hard for me to... How can you be cold, but then also feel all these things? But I understand that Brahman is not necessarily cold. It's not choosing to be cold. That's just the way it is. And then it's completely separate from your mind and your body there, which can feel emotion, which can feel pain, sympathy, and all that. So that just that cold, that line of detachment is kind of hard for me to understand. But I do understand it to some degree. I guess, I don't know if I ever will. I wonder what kind of question I would ask to fully understand that cold detachment and the emotion. Brahman and your temporary body. I don't know what kind of question I could ask that could bridge that gap. It's pretty close, I understand it, but it's just, there's still something there missing.
Viveka Vairagya Vishuddha Chitta, purified mind. Dispassion is there, but dispassion does not mean he'll be like a wall, not reacting to anything at all in the world. He reacted to everything. He felt every bit as much as we do and much more.
And that's the thing, is that yes, the body and the mind did feel all of that, but his true self did not, right? And that's the issue that I have. Not an issue, but just a not quite complete understanding. I do understand it, but not completely.
That's why he could sympathize with everybody, especially with those who suffered. He says, my God, all of this, all humanity, all living beings, that's the only God I recognize and I worship and I bow down to. But especially, my God the poor, my God the sick, my God the wicked. Those are the objects of my special worship. He always had this power. And so Ramakrishnaji says, Yosau Viveki Tamaham Namami. I bow down to this Vivekananda. This is his understanding of Vivekananda. And he always had this power. Here in San Francisco, he would sit in those trams. They still have trams. Of course, they are more modern now with electric power and everything. He would sit in those trams and then he would be immersed in samadhi. He would be lost till it would take him around and he would get upset with himself. It was difficult for him not to be in samadhi. I think Mary Louise Burke, she remarks that it seemed that he had this series of like mini samadhis throughout the day. Here in New York, one of the beautiful descriptions. After Chicago, he came to New York, established the Vedanta Society of New York, us, in November 1894. Rented locations. One of the most beautiful descriptions is how Vivekananda, he said he would be in a meditative mood, in silent, absorbed in the luminosity within. And he says, while this great city slept at the night, Vivekananda meditated. Sometimes the most wonderful experience would be in the daytime, in that room where in that apartment where he stayed, there was rented. It would be you would walk into a room where Vivekananda was there, and suddenly you would be struck by the absolute silence there. He is in samadhi. And one would slowly back out of the room carefully. So a kind of silence and luminosity used to pervade the atmosphere around him. He always had this power. Sometimes, to his embarrassment, he would sit in a class in New York here, teaching meditation, Raja Yoga, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and to demonstrate meditation, he would start meditating, go into samadhi. Half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, until the audience would slowly get up and carefully leave. And he got impatient with himself. And he taught some people, remember, they did not know these things. There's a special word, a mantra has to be said. Say it in my ears when I'm in that particular state. It shows you exactly what Sri Ramakrishna used to do to those people around him in Dakshineshwar. If I go into samadhi and don't come down, chant this mantra, this particular mantra in my ears. And different bhavas and different mantras. Which shows you samadhi is not a state of unconsciousness. It's a state of heightened consciousness. It's perfectly aware, but absorbed in one thing. Not in other things will not get through to him. But something related to that will get through to him. Something related to that idea of the divine. So he always had that power. And he could throw others into it. Here in New York, Vedanta Society, he's giving a talk. Abhedanandaji has come from England to help him here. From India to England, and England to here. And Vivekananda is giving a talk. Abhedananda later writes, I felt as if my kundalini was rising when I listened to Vivekananda. Everybody felt their minds were being raised. He could transmit spirituality. It is not just a talk. He's giving. He says, Vivekananda said later, do you think in America I just gave lectures? No, I gave them spirituality. After one of the talks, Abhedananda, foolishly I think, he announced, now there will be a question answer. And Vivekananda scolded him. Question answer after this? Do you want to spoil it? After this? What question answer? Let them go away carrying this with themselves. In Belur Math, he is talking with visitors under that big mango tree, which is still there, barely alive now with support and all, but he used to sit under that in a cot and talking with visitors. Now, people would be affected by this transmission in different ways, depending upon their level of understanding. So that day, he was talking with visitors. Swami Premananda, he would conduct the worship of Sri Ramakrishna. At that time, it was the old temple. If those who have gone to Belur Math, in the courtyard, before the big temple was constructed, the old temple on the first floor. So Swami Premananda would go up there, finish the worship of Sri Ramakrishna, would come down with the tray of the flowers and the sandal paste and the offerings, and he would go to the Ganga to conduct the worship of Ganga with the tray of offerings. So Vivekananda was talking, and the subject came to God realization of Brahman. And Vivekananda says, do not seek, just see Brahman. Here is Brahman. He says, here is Brahman. The moment he said this, a stunned silence descended upon the courtyard. And all the people who were sitting around him, they were lost in deep meditation. But at different levels. None more so than Swami Premananda, another disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who after finishing the worship in the temple was coming down, walking down towards the Ganga with the tray of offerings. He was not part of the conversation. He just heard, here is Brahman. Just Vivekananda saying that. And he stopped in samadhi. One foot in front of the other. Like a picture. They stayed, that courtyard, they stayed in that blessed moment for some time. And then Vivekananda quietly said, he used to call Baburam Da, go, please go. And Baba Maharaj started walking. He always had that power of becoming immersed in the Absolute himself and throwing anybody else.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there. So, I do wonder how many people in the talks he gave, especially in the UN and in the United States, that perhaps hit that. I'm kind of curious. He said, Swami Sarvarpiananda here said that he gave the West spirituality. So it's not to say that he gave them samadhi, at least at that time. I think perhaps maybe that people need to understand what Advaita Vedanta is first before they can get into that. Clearly, whenever he went back to, I forget the city name, Burmat, that him merely speaking, saying here is Brahman, put a lot of people in a meditative state. But in the United States, because obviously this is fairly new, probably at least got them thinking about it. Again, I don't know what type of state they put the people in. I doubt it's meditative because none of these people really ever think about that kind of stuff. But then again, I don't know. All Swami Sarvarpiananda here said is that he gave them spirituality. So at least I'm taking that as in implanted the idea of spirituality in their mind, the seeds for spirituality to grow. But anyways, kind of sad that Swami Vivekananda died at such a young age. Can't remember, was it 39 perhaps? 32, 39, somewhere around there. Jeez. I don't remember what he died of. Hopefully towards the end of this we will understand what was the reason of his death. Because he's fairly young. And that's kind of crazy. I could only imagine the amount of things he could do if he were to live longer. So anyways, that's the end of this part. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.